Jeff Beal, composer of House of Cards. Congratulations on receiving, if my count is correct, your 14th and 15th Emmy nominations this year. You've won 3 already. So at this point, I suppose you're a veteran. Do you just have an acceptance speech in your pocket ready to pull out at a moment's notice, or how does it work?
Yeah, yeah. And the funny thing is, you always have to sort of be prepared, and you always feel like a sort of a jerk when you don't get to say it. Like, why did I spend all that time thinking of something that's not going to be said? But no, but in all seriousness, there's a lot of people you want to thank. I'd love to thank the people on House of Cards because we've had such a great run on this show. But it's all gravy at this point. As they say, it's an honor to be nominated, which is true. I think, I look at all the folks I'm nominated with this year, and it's just amazing, the talent, Bruce Broughton and Michael and Jeff Dana, and just the list goes on. I do really believe we're kind of like in this kind of really cool golden age of the small screen. There's just so much quality being made right now for TV, and I think all of us composers are really benefiting from that. We're sort of like gypsies. We're always sort of just kind of looking around. Where's the cool place to work? And this place right now seems to be a real sweet spot for people that are doing incredible work. I mean, I've always dreamed of. I love actors, and so I think it's because I come from a performance background as a jazz musician. So for me, there's a few actors who've always sort of been on my bucket list, and Kevin Spacey was one of those names. And so the idea that I'm scoring a Kevin Spacey performance, and not just a movie, but now 36 hours of that, it's just like that's a real dream come true. To have that kind of person that you're in support of in a musical score.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a bit about that. How do you compose music for Kevin Spacey's character in the show? Where do you start with?
I like to write chronologically, So the first scene I ever scored was the opening of the pilot when he comes outside and a dog has been hit by a car, and he sort of does his first breaking the fourth wall moment when you don't see the animal and he's talking to the camera. And it's a great scene because it sort of was a great little microcosm of the whole show. Breaking the fourth wall, this very sort of dark tone, the sense of metaphor. Of course, the dog is in a lot of ways sort of metaphor for other people that he sort of puts out of their misery, you could say, in so many words later on in the show. But there is a complexity, and in Kevin's performance, I really wanted to give this character that he's created a sense of these layers. In a way, he is a creature of politics, and he kind of just does the rational, logical thing as his brain works, as his moral compass dictates. So you don't want to mock a character. You don't get very far by mocking them character. And as Fincher and I talked about in the very beginning, it's not like a monster. It's not like a monster in the sense that he thinks of himself as a monster. He just is. That just is who he is. And that's usually my general go-to place in all the work I do, is trying to find the sort of honesty of a character's actions and emotional space, no matter how dark or twisted that might be, and sort of bring the audience there and let them sort of make their own judgments or reactions to what's happening. But I think the more you invest a scene and a film in the story and the telling of the story, honestly, if you come from a place of honesty, I think you get two things. One is that hopefully an audience doesn't feel manipulated by the music, but also in this incredible power of what music can do. Hopefully they get maybe drawn into the story in an even more fascinating and deeper way.
Mm-hmm. And one of the really great things about the show is that Robin Wright's character is such a great counterpoint to Kevin Spacey's. So when you're composing music for her, where do you start from?
Yeah, I love her character, and she's a great performer in this role. Especially, I would say season 3 was a great season for Robin's character. I had really a lot of fun scoring her this season. Yeah, she is sort of like she's sort of like the flip side of Frank. I mean, she is Lady Macbeth, so in a lot of ways, her world is Frank's world. But but because of who she is and the journey that she takes, You know, there's a way in which I always feel like there's something mysterious about Claire. You know, like there's always more going on in her head that she's thinking. It's sort of like plays into, you know, not to be sexist about it, but it's like the intuition of a woman and the sort of brains of a woman. I mean, I love the way in which sort of Frank will often sort of defer to her or really look to her for counsel or you know, sort of a validation of something that he's maybe thinking. And often she is the one that's really driving the train. You know, there were some great scenes. I remember at the end of season 2, like before Frank kind of writes the letter to President Walker to sort of throw himself on the fire in hopes of getting him to trust him. And she just says to him, she goes, tear your heart out and give it to him. You know, she's just sort of like this unbelievably relentless force of nature. But she's also really sexy, and I love her relationship with Frank. You know, I mean, obviously the smoking the cigarette scenes are always sort of these wonderful Frank and Claire moments. So I think something that's been a part of their world musically from the very beginning was this sort of sophisticated, almost film noirish kind of sense of harmony and melody and slightly jazzy. It always felt like it fit their world in a fun way, in the sense that I love the fact that our characters, they kind of remind me of like what I remember characters in movies used to being, like really sophisticated and with a cigarette. And, you know, a lot of movie writing in the present day has gotten incredibly realistic and has sort of gone away from that more stylized type of performance and type of scripts. And the way Bo has sort of written these people really sort of inspires, I think, a lot of those type of choices.
Mm-hmm. And you have a background in features as well. So, and this is a very cinematic show, as you said before. Can you talk a bit about the differences or the complexities of composing for a television show as opposed to a movie, or is there really a difference at this point?
I think the trickiest thing is just the sheer amount of material you create. Obviously, you know, a season of House of Cards is 13 hours of programming, give or take, and it's really scripted almost like a 13-hour movie. So, you know, you got to sort of gear up to sort of run a marathon creatively and sort of figure out a way to, on one level, sort of keep the quality as high as you can, you know, but on another level, take the audience through that very long journey of the story. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I like the phrase you use, cinematic, because I think that's one of the interesting things. When I look at what inspires me and what sort of I want to deliver in the music, there's a way in which even the show is sort of very simple visually. Like, we don't do a lot of flat. The camera's not moving around a lot. Every shot is really composed and beautiful to look at. And, you know, I spent a lot of time studying performance and just sort of letting a scene speak to me and sort of figuring out, you know, I love the words. I love the sense of poetry, you know, that we have as artists, you know, and it's a way in which often what we try to do, I think one of the powers of film is the way and sort of kind of distill a lot of elements into something very simple and very powerful. So a lot of what I like about the show is the way in which we get to these sort of more poetic places in storytelling, and often music is that sort of enter music. Music is great at that. Music is it's, you know, it's the suspension of disbelief, and it's, you know, it's not like I'm writing an operatic score, but I think a lot about an operatic sensibility when I write the music, because it does have that sort of grand drama feeling to it. I think probably in the case of House of Cards, the fact that it also has its roots sort of in the Shakespearean style and drama, you know. This really Richard III, this is Macbeth. So there's that other layer of sort of grand opera that's always sort of at work, you know, in this very contemporary sort of setting that forms.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you've laid down all this groundwork in the first season, you're now going into the fourth. Is it still difficult to come up with new things, or, you know, find new ways of telling the story musically, you know, once you've written this recognizable theme and kind of coming up with these motifs for the characters?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think House of Cards is a kind of show that, unlike other shows I've done, intentionally stay in the whole world, like I did Monkeys, and that was you know, a story of God. He doesn't really change. Sort of the nature of the character. House of Cards, every season is a new world. And I like the fact that usually there's a tradition we have now at the end of each season. Bo Willimon and I will have a conversation about the next season. The storylines are going to be what the sort of thematic material that we're going to cover, and I'm really working hard to create a new musical voice for that particular season. And I think it's something that really helps keep the quality up. You know, nobody's sort of doing it again to phone it in. It's like from the very top down, everybody wants to explore new territory and uncover more and more layers of the onion. That's sort of the nature of our show, our story, is that it is sort of evolutionary in that way. And as the story evolves, we're always seeking for finding new ways. I mean, I think if inspiration, to me, in all honesty, it does come from the story. I mean, the fact that in the writing, they really are wanting to push the envelope in every new season, really deal with new material and new stories and new emotional layers. And that gives me a lot of fuel to find my way musically.
Right. You mentioned earlier that you had a background as a jazz musician. How did that background contribute to your becoming a composer later on and working on this show in particular?
Yeah, I can't kind of imagine I'm getting sort of echo room thing. Kind of drive me crazy.
Yeah.
You hear that on your end as well?
I do, yeah. Maybe it's just the is your internet connection good?
It should be. Let's just check my Can you hold on? I just want to see if my son's online.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Okay, I'll be right back.
All right.
Sorry about that. I have no idea.
Oh, no problem.
You know what, I'll just turn down the volume when I'm talking.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so you asked about jazz?
Yes, and how that contributed to your becoming a composer and working on this show in particular.
I do come from a performance background, and the thing that my gateway drug into was improvising on the trumpet, and the trumpet player. Something about that experience made me feel really incredibly excited and spontaneous. And it's also collective when you play jazz. You're creating with other people in real time. And I sort of realized several years ago, very much like how I feel when I'm writing a score. It's all about collaboration. It's all very much like playing in a band, you know. And I love the sense of the unexpected. I'm a big believer in sort of chance and improvisation. You know, a lot of the best ideas for me when I'm writing come when I'm not trying to sort of rest them out, but just sort of they happen, you know. And I saw a lot of the work I do, because that's sort of my musical voice comes from improvisation. I just try to sort of get into that space of not, and I think every writer gets to this point in their own way, but it's almost like you need to turn off the inner critic. You know, you need to turn off the inner critic and just get into that flow. And I love the power of like a mistake or a little accident that happens, you know. One of the nice things about technology, you know, is that I can write and sort of use my ear as opposed to all the music theory that I've studied for so many years, but kind of would love to forget, you know. And there's a lot of sort of weird, strange dissonances in House of Cards, which, you know, if you sort of analyze them on purely musical terms, you could say, well, there's wrong notes all over the place in the kind of music I write for the show. But a lot of what I'm exploring in those sort of little nooks and crannies is that sense of sort of the the unsettling nature in which a unexpected surprise, a musical surprise, can sort of make you lean forward and your ears perk up, you know. And that's, I guess, the nature of drama for me, you know, like the nature of storytelling is the element of surprise. I mean, it's true of doing comedy or of drama. So I think a lot of the work I do, and when I draw on the jazz, it's trying to find that element of the tension between, you know, setting up an expectation and then breaking that tension. You know, all my favorite improvisers always would do that to me. Miles Davis, Chet Baker, you know, Herbie Hancock, you know, I'm going to hear Wayne Shorter tonight at the Hollywood Bowl. Is brilliant improviser. And just last night I was hanging out with my good buddy John Patitucci, wonderful jazz bass player. So, you know, that tradition of music making, I think, is really a wonderful training ground for any type of music. It's really kind of fun for me to know that a lot of my heroes like Jerry Goldsmith, John Williams, and many other composers, both in the concert world and film music, sort of had roots in jazz. You know, I think it's a great sort of gateway into discovering your own musical voice. And of course, in film and TV, where you have to work incredibly quickly, you know, it also gives you facility to be able to be prolific, which is, of course, you know, built into what we do.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me, and congratulations on your Emmy nominations and for your work on
Thank you so much, Zach.
You're welcome.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, man. Send me a link when it's up. I'll look forward to seeing it.
Will do. Yes. Thank you very much.
All right, man. Thanks. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.